Just maybe you can tell us about how do you get involved in the anti-Lynas campaign?
Sure. For the last 12 years, I've been working and focusing around large-scale mining and extractives and the impacts on local and Indigenous communities in Australia, in the Pacific, and also internationally. 3 years ago, when the New York Times article came out that highlighted that Lynas had been given the green light, and that was how local community really found out about the issue, a good friend of mine, who's an Australian citizen but was born in Kuantan, rang me, and she said, "We need help. This is an Australian company. What can we do?" And from there, it really originally started, it was more of an educational campaign through a website, and over the last 3 years facilitating local community coming to Australia for speaking tours, lobbying, and also for the last 4 years we have intervened and had a presence at Lynas' shareholder meetings. Since 2011, and March 2011, pretty much when I guess local community started to come together, because my friend was actually living in Kuantan at the time, looking after her mother. So it was very fresh, and you know, obviously we had to do quite a lot of research to understand who Lynas was, the situation around rare earths, what rare earths were used for, and what the key issues were for the local community. And I think the most important thing for me where I got involved is that Lynas has no social licence to operate, that they hadn't consulted with local community. The fact that the local community had found out through a New York Times article is incredibly poor, and Australian company acting like this overseas. I felt a responsibility, along with some other people I've been working with over the last 3 years in Australia, to really show some solidarity with the community in Malaysia who are opposed to Lynas being here.
Right. The government has been talking about, also Lynas have been talking about, there's no proof that, you know, the whole plant is dangerous. There's no scientific proof, you know, stuff like that. So that has been their main line of defense. What's your opinion about that?
Actually, a German institute, the Oki Institute, have written a very sophisticated scientific report that proves them very wrong. It's an independent report. And I've seen this over and over with mining companies. They have a very strong PR spin, and if they have government support, it's very easy for them to have a line that, you know, without us, green technologies will not happen. But how can we develop green technologies when at the, you know, from the cradle to the grave, at the end of that process, you have radioactive waste? There is no permanent storage for radioactive waste in the world. We know that. It's been a long-term issue around nuclear power and uranium mining, all these sort of things. So for them to say that is completely incorrect, very irresponsible. It's certainly not corporate social responsibility to be, I guess, trying to cover dirt over the real truth there. And I mean, for me, it does come back to the fact that if these communities haven't been consulted, if these communities haven't given consent, then why is this development allowed to go ahead? And Lynas has publicly stated, and in the last week, while I was detained, they also said it again, that we didn't consult communities properly. They know it was a fundamental mistake, and I hope they've learned from it, and I hope other companies learn from it. And we're seeing, even with some of the biggest corporations in the world, like Rio Tinto and BHP Billiton, they now know that if they don't consult with communities, if they don't get free, prior and informed consent, that they end up being in big trouble, because the power of the grassroots, the power of people, and it might take years, legal challenges, it holds them back, and while they don't advertise it much, it costs them a lot of money. And today I just read in some financial news in Australia that the worst stocks in 2014 was Lynas Corporation. Yeah. So they're financially in trouble, and I think another issue is if Lynas you know, goes down and they have to leave, who's going to clean up that waste? Who's responsible for that waste? And is there another company that's ready to walk in and take over the largest rare earth refinery in the world? Okay. So last year in November 2013, we facilitated, and when we say facilitated, they fund themselves to come to Australia, but Himpunan, Hijau and Save Malaysia and Stop Lynas came to the Lynas shareholder meeting in Sydney. We had a stronghold of people outside. We had a massive inflatable nuclear waste drum. It's a sort of very visual thing, and then also some members of the groups went into the AGM to ask questions, so a kind of multi-pronged strategy there. And Wong Tak, who's the chairman of Himpunan Hijau, said, you know, we're going to announce our strategy over the next 6 months. And so publicly he announced that in 6 months they would blockade and stop the Lynas plant. At that point we discussed us coming over as observers and to support the protest. And probably a couple of months ago we made the decision to resource ourselves to come over and support that work. It was the first time for me and my colleague Tali McIntyre to actually come to Kuantan and have a look at the lamp. The first day we were there, we went to the gates and went up to the checkpoint to request a tour, which they refused, which I think is very disappointing because this has also been another issue. 2 years ago, Mr. Tan, from the chairperson of Save Malaysia Stop Lynas, while we were in the shareholder meeting, we both had proxies and asked questions. Nick Curtis, the founder of Lynas and the chairman at the time, stated, you know, come and do a tour. And Mr. Tan said, we've been asking for a tour and you've been refusing. And actually in that shareholder meeting, Nick Curtis tried to shut Mr. Tan down, and shareholders stood up and said, we want to hear what this man has got to say. We want to know, is there really huge opposition against this plant? So shareholders for the last 2 years have been very worried, and a couple of shareholders have come to us and said they've withdrawn their investment in the company. And we know that some of the major investors have also been quietly pulling out as well. So they are in trouble, and it would be very interesting to see how the next 6 months unfold, particularly with the, I think September the 2nd will be a decision on the permanent licence. Yeah.